Alrighty, we are here with our friend Gabriel Sanchez, representative for Georgia State House. How are we doing today, Gabe?
I'm doing good. How about y'all? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Good year so far, starting out. We've had
Mm.
so much happen.
Yeah.
Donald Trump hasn't been president of the United States for a full year yet. And I
Jeez,
mean, he
yeah.
hasn't even been president for a full month yet this year. And we've had two major events happen. We kind of want to start off with what happened in Minnesota, the shooting with ICE. Uh, what are your thoughts, reactions hearing that news?
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's a horrific tragedy, and honestly it's something that would is very inevitable based on the actions of the administration, the lawlessness, the chaos. And also, this isn't the first person who's been killed by ICE, actually. I believe there's been three or four now
Yeah.
who have been killed by ICE in the past few months. And so Um, clearly it's just goes to show just how much of a negative impact this is having on our communities. There is basically no benefit to ICE even existing in the first place. I've been calling for the abolishment of ICE since I ran for office a couple of years ago, and I will continue to do so because they're not a necessary organization, agency. They are a bunch of fascists, losers who have nothing better to do than terrorize brown people for the fun of it. And so to me, there's no reason to even have that agency exist in the first place. Immigrants, every single study, every single economist will tell you immigrants are a net benefit to this country. Anyone who tells you otherwise is a propagandist or a liar.
Yeah, we've seen so far for 2025, we saw unemployment tick up to a little over 4.4% when it was originally at 4%. We saw, inflation start to rise all in the midst of, this immigration battle and like Donald Trump going and attacking all of these communities. And somehow, people are still demonizing these immigrants who have done nothing but actually benefit our community. What are your thoughts on situations like that? Like, how do you try to convey a message of like, hey, like, immigrants are a net benefit. They help our economy to grow. They take jobs that most others aren't willing to take.
Hmm.
And they are people that are actually like contributing in a positive way to the community.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to push back on all those narratives, and also just for what you were saying, like the unemployment rate, like we don't even know if that's accurate because they've been like, Trump fired the person for trying to give honest takes about
The
the actual
BLI.
state of the
Yeah.
economy. So we don't even know if they're, lying about the numbers from the government now at this point. But the in regards to the immigration issue, I think it's something that, frankly, I think we need our Democrats to step up and actually fight back against this. I do think that it's obviously changed in the past few months, especially in the past week. And I think a lot of people are waking up and when I'm talking about Democrats, I'm talking about leadership. I'm not talking about
Yeah.
rank and file because they've been great. My constituents have been supporting me from day one on this issue. And I'm really, really blessed to have people in my community who want to support, regardless of whether they are immigrants or not. Um, but the leadership, especially on the national level, need to step up and stop being cowards and stop looking at poll numbers and start looking at people. Because I think, frankly, they have allowed for this narrative to keep coming. I know that now people are starting to realize where we're at and we need to be pushing back against this. But I wish they had been there sooner when we were talking about this from the very beginning of Trump's administration,
Um,
instead of having I believe 2,000 Democrats or around 2,000 Democrats voting, 2,000 Democrats voting for the Lake and Riley Act, which is helping actually ICE do a lot of the things that they're doing.
yeah.
And so, they need to stop being complicit. They need to be pushing back as much as we can. And then obviously we got to push back against the lies and the misinformation the Republicans are doing. And the best way you do that is by organizing and by having a clear and concise message and actually communicating that out as much as possible. We actually just had a press conference today with the Senate Democrats as well as some House Democrats, um, including myself, around the ICE, attack on our community, and we're introducing legislation in both chambers to combat ICE and to hold them accountable for their lawlessness and their authoritarianism.
Yeah, it's kind of wild because like you kind of just touched on the fact that, Trump went and fired the head of BLS, which is literally the shooting the messenger when she was releasing the inflation and unemployment data. We've we've kind of seen every time anybody has any kind of pushback against Donald Trump, there is some kind of legal action or some kind of repercussion. I mean, it just happened this weekend, right? We saw Jerome Powell is now being indicted by the DOJ. And Donald Trump is acting like he doesn't know, but like reality is like he's been guiding Pam Bondi on, the indictments of like someone like
Mhm.
Comey a couple months ago. He literally he posted that on Truth Social saying like you need to go after Comey. And like we've never seen anything like this, right? Like we've never seen a president of the United States go and direct their DOJ on who to go and indict. We never saw that with Biden. We never saw that with Obama. We never saw that with Bush. Like this is just so new and like so out of the
Not
realm.
publicly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Not publicly true, but like, I mean, he's putting it on Truth Social. We've never seen that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just terrifying to me. Like, how how do you go and try to convey a message to your constituents saying like, hey, like those who are voting for Donald Trump to be like, hey, like, listen, this guy is the not doing what he should be doing. He's attacking innocent people. He's going and attacking like, people that have followed the law. Like, what is your message to those people that vote for you, but also vote for someone like Donald Trump?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, honestly, I think that's a good question. I represent 60,000 constituents, about 35,000 are registered voters, and then obviously, probably like maybe a 20 or a little over 20,000 actually vote in the election. And so I don't know the exact number of people who voted for me versus Trump.
Hmm.
Um, it's not a super high number, but there is some there for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. I just think that like the problem, a lot of well, we've been dealing with this now new era of politics for the last decade, right? And I think one of the issues that we have is, the balance between going to people, meeting people where they're at, and trying to understand where they're coming from, having some empathy, and trying to meet folks while also still holding people accountable
Yeah.
and pushing back forcefully and strongly when needed, right? And I feel like there's not really an easy answer because it's one of those things where like once the genie's out of the lamp, you can't put it back in. It's we got to this situation because, in my view, both parties as institutions failed the American people, created an economy that doesn't work for us, but instead works for the people at the top, the major corporations, the wealthy elite. And because of that, as a result, we have a lot of frustrated folks who either decide not to no longer participate in the process or go for some crazy wild shot like Donald Trump because they say, you know what else do I have to lose? Right.
Yeah.
Um, and while I think in 2016, a lot of people were more taking a chance on Trump, now that it's been 10 years, a decade of Trump, that he's been in the public sphere, and at least in political world, um, I do think that now it's morphed into not just that anymore, but people are now followers of Trump. They're a cult of Trump, right? And they do everything he says, and they, because of that, become much more significantly more racist, more authoritarian, and more extreme in every respect, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the conversation we were having in 2016, where say like Bernie Sanders is like the antidote to this kind of things, and progressive politics, I don't think it's the same solution now that we're 10 years down the road. Um, I still think that the only way to truly solve this issue is to not just push back against what's going on and to show the reality of the situation, but also to present a alternative vision that shows people that they're actually going to have something to fight for and work for. I think Zohar Mamdani shows us the roadmap towards that in the best possible way, where you talk only about the issues that everyday people are facing, and they believe you when you say you're going to fight for them, and you actually do it. And
Yeah.
that means not taking corporate PAC money. That means, fighting for progressive leftist politics that are actually going to fight for working class people or democratic socialism, like myself or Zoran do. So to me, you have to both push back against that and also present an alternative vision. And that's what, in my view, has not been done well enough. Uh, in a lot of ways, I feel like the pushing back against Trump happens a lot, but not the presenting of a better vision or, in my view, a story to folks that people can digest and say, this is why you're suffering, and this is how we're going to fix it. And so I think we can learn a lot from Zoran Montani's campaign. I think we can learn a lot from the Democratic Socialist movement in general on how to do that in the future.
So, two questions, I guess. Kind of tying it back a little bit of like what Royland was saying, but also like, we talked about all the officials that he's going after and things like that. But I also think it's interesting that he like is basically, I can't say it's a coincidence that he's sitting here talking about the Somali fraud and, targeting this community, and then he sends ICE and they ramp it up in Minnesota, right? Like, I mean, it's a continuation of him targeting that community, but then also it expands to almost, he's almost attacking the entire state of Minnesota now.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna fund you. I'm gonna do all these different things. And so I guess just a little bit comment on, you know, I think truthfully, like him weaponizing ICE and, officials that are supposed to be working for our protection supposedly, and, targeting these cities that are against him, and also kind of, I think in some ways shoring up and getting him content for his base and kind of
yeah.
feeding it to them to encourage them. And then also, I guess, kind of after that, another question that I have, we can follow that up after you kind of like t lay out your vision of like what you see with like attacking specific communities.
Yeah, I mean, this is very much the authoritarian fascist playbook that we've seen in history being repeated again, right? There's no question about
Mhm.
it. Anyone who is a student of history or objectively looking at the situation would not be able to see it any other way. That's what that's what we're witnessing right now, right? I think we should legitimately be um, preparing for, and I am talking with my colleagues about this. We should generally be preparing for like the worst case scenario. I think we're in that territory. I don't think it's guaranteed. I don't necessarily think that's the most likely scenario, but I do think it is a
Mhm.
possible scenario
Yeah.
that we should be ready for. And in my view, I think we're at a crossroads right now of deciding whether we go down the fascist route or if we are able to save this country and actually put forward a government that actually works for the people, right? And so for me, I think these attacks are very obviously he's weaponizing his military force that he's created for his own purposes. That's all he's doing. He's
Mhm.
using it to attack his enemies because
Yeah.
he can't do the military. He can't use the actual military to do that. So he's created his own military effectively with ICE to do that and to be his, soldiers and whatever.
Mhm.
And so this is only going to continue. He's going to continue to ignore laws, break the Constitution. I mean, this entire term and even the first term, but this term is even more like insane. He's effectively been completely breaking hundreds of laws, like nonstop,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
destroying the Constitution. And it's just getting away with it, right? Because he has the power to do it, and there's no way for him to be stopped um, currently because we don't have the votes to impeach him. In fact, we voted to impeach him last year, and once again, dozens of Democrats voted against impeachment, which just shows you that we have a weak, cowardly. I mean, it's just the Weimar Republic all over again in Germany, of the weak, cowardly liberals who, gets run all over when the fascists come. We need new leadership. That's why I think the 2026 midterms are imperative, not just in the general election to flip from Republican to Democrat. We also need people to pay attention to the primary elections and get rid of these cowardly, useless uh, Democrats who aren't doing anything to help us.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. So following that up, I guess like you kind of mentioned it, but like specifically like you were talking about like being a democratic socialist and like what that means to you. And also I think in a little broader sense, what is your suggestion for people who, maybe the democratic socialist message doesn't work as well? And also, like, do you see it as a simply an ideological suggest like goal that you should head towards, like being a democratic socialist, and that's going to win you votes, or like, how do you see moderates and other people being able to play with, like, maybe somebody that's a little bit further left than them, but actually, offering a real solution, right? Like, how do you kind of combine those two, if you see a
Yeah.
vision for that?
I mean, look, when I go up to someone at the door and to go talk to them, I don't say, "Hi, I'm Gabriel the Socialist." I say, "Hi, I'm your representative, Gabriel Sanchez, and I'm here to fight for housing, healthcare, and economy for all for you." Right? It's talking about the issues. The most common thing you learn when it comes to organizing in general is that every single conversation should be a 70-30 or 80-20 conversation where you're listening 70 or 80% of the time and you're only talking 20 or 30% of the time because that's what our job is to listen to the people and then bring that back to the capital, right, and do the work for them, right. And so I am not some superhero. I am simply a megaphone of the people. That is my role, right, as a representative. And so regardless of what my label is, what my ideology is, I'm here to represent my constituents and I'm very responsive to that. Now obviously, yes, I do have the democratic socialist principles that I'm not going to, uh, shy away from. I'm going to stand strong on them. I have my red lines, but I also listen to my constituents, whether I agree with them or not. Or there are a lot of issues where I'm not fully, there's we introduce around 2,000 bills each session, like the 2 year cycle, right? And so I don't know what my stance is on every single one of those 2,000 bills, right? I think it's important for there are a lot of things that I need to learn, I need to or know more about, and that having that communication and that relationship with my constituents is really the forefront of that. So for me, obviously my ideology is a big part of who I am and, part of my politics. But I think the most important thing over everything else is being someone in the community who is representing the people in my community and organizing and engaging with my community. And that's what I prioritize over everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on Donald Trump breaking every law humanly possible. A couple weeks ago, a week and a half ago, something like that, Donald Trump went and abducted Maduro and is now apparently going to be governing Venezuela, or him and a couple other people from his cabinet. It's going to be Marco Rubio, let's be honest. And now, and I don't know if you heard, but apparently some of the oil executives already knew about this plan prior
Mhm.
because he had every intention to make sure that like all of the oil from
Yep.
Venezuela was actually going to be brought, or not all of it, but a lot of it was going to be brought to the United States. Um, what are your thoughts initially on when you heard the news about Venezuela and the abduction of Maduro? And then what are your feelings about these corporate lobbies and oil companies hearing more about this than Congress and
Right.
the people, American people?
Yeah, this actually connects well to the previous question as well about, me being more to the left of folks. When you actually look down and sit down on the issues that we all care about, right? We agree on most of them, right? When it comes to universal health care, it comes to minimum wage, when it comes to, and this is another example where I think most Americans agree we don't want to be funding or getting mixed up in these foreign, like regime change wars that only hurt us as well as the country that we're trying to supposedly help. Um, and we don't want to use our taxpayer dollars to try to go in and rescue another country uh, when we first like have seen time and time again in history that we never actually help them. Actually, we usually make things worse, and we at the cost of our people as well, right? The fact that Trump is talking about we are in control of Venezuela, I don't know anyone who voted for that, right? Maybe some of the people in South Florida. Outside of that, I don't think any of us in vast majority of the country voted for that. And so, I think it's just another one of those things where you're seeing the corporate elite, the big oil in this case, uh, running the show. They get to get whatever they want. They get informed because clearly that's who they represent. It's not us, the people, it's them. They get informed beforehand on these things and like, look, we're going to give you a nice deal over here. Meanwhile, we get screwed over. And like you can say, oh, well, the operation was just, a little one day bomb, blah, blah, blah. We got Maduro, everything's done. If you think this thing is done, I think I need to bring you back to 2002 Iraq and ask you that about what you think about that. We're going to be here in this mess for a while now because of that. And it's going to cost us. And it's going to cost Venezuela too. And it's going to cost the Venezuelan people. And it is just insane to me that we continue to have these rogue, like, without any congressional approval, attacks on other countries, the undermining of the sovereignty of other nations,
Yeah.
and destabilizing the region while also putting it all on the taxpayer's foot. And for whose benefit? No one except for those who are at the top.
Do
And that
you
is what people are tired of.
Do you think people actually believe the whole? Because like him and JD Vance were pitching like it's to help make sure that drugs are no longer coming into the United States. When the reality is we know it was for oil and regime change. Do you think that people are actually buying that, lack of a better term, bullshit in terms of like saying it was because they're trying to figure out or solve the drug issue in the United States?
Unfortunately, there will be people who believe it, but it is obvious, as you said, BS, because the vast majority of fentanyl, I don't think there's any fentanyl that comes from Venezuela, if I'm not mistaken. If there is, it's less than 1%. It's
Yeah.
very barely any, right? There are other nations that you can worry about if you're talking about that, but again, that's a whole other question about like how we even deal with that in the first place, because clearly the war on drugs is a huge failure. But it's a BS excuse. I mean, if that were the thing, they would have charged him on that. But that's not what they charged him for. They charged him for having a machine gun or whatever. Like it's all BS, right? And they're not even like at least before the difference I think with a lot of people is like Trump versus like previous administrations is that at least before they try to hide it and like try to seem like they're doing the right thing or like do respectability politics, which in my view I still think is bad, but now they're just doing it out in the open.
Yeah.
And like to me, what's even more upsetting about that is not necessarily that they're doing it out in the open per se, it's more that the American people are falling for it,
Yeah.
right? I think it's disappointing. I think it's an indictment on where we're at as a country. And I think it shows that we have a lot of work to do to organize our communities to recognize where we're really at and where we actually need to go, which is not in this direction.
He's been showing a little more aggression towards Colombia, Mexico, and now Greenland. Do you think that he acts on any of these countries? I mean, like in my mind, like hearing the Greenland, like creating, making sure Greenland is part of the United States is just so odd to me. And the fact that like now Germany and I forget another country has deployed troops into Greenland to make sure that like there's no military intervention from the United States. Like, do you think that like for one, is this going to harm our relationship with the United Nations? And two, do you think that there is any possibility that he goes and you know goes and attacks Greenland or Colombia or Mexico
I mean,
within
our
the next
relationship is
year?
already destroyed with the UN in Europe anyway. So, but like, in regards to, well, first off, so obviously my family's from Colombia, so obviously I have a lot of thoughts about him attacking my country that I also love and believe they should have their own sovereignty as well. Who would have thought? Um, Let me collect my thoughts for a second. I mean, there's just a lot there. I I think it's one of those things where it's like, first off, it's a distraction from the fact that he's a pedophile, Epstein files. You know,
Yeah.
um, he's trying to find literally anything he can do to
Mhm.
distract people from that.
Yeah.
Um, Greenland, I think it just shows how nervous the U.S. is about becoming a failing empire and wanting to secure more natural resources to at least to try to stave off the inevitable. Um, and so I think that's where that is headed. Obviously, people say that they're not going to invade; they're just going to buy it off of Denmark. But I don't see them allowing that to happen,
Yeah.
right? Um, so I'm not sure what their plan is for that or why um, they think they can do it.
He
Now,
said
then
he's
again,
not opposed to using military action, though, in terms of
oh
taking
yeah, of course
Greenland.
not. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing with Trump is that like unfortunately, you have to take him seriously because half the time he does actually follow through with what he says, and the other half the time he doesn't. And
Yeah.
it's basically just a coin toss. It has nothing to do with strategy or intelligence. It has everything to do with how he's feeling that day. If he's on the right meds or not, or if his dementia is getting worse. So like, I think like, I'm glad that we have a geriocracy leading us in this great country. So, you know, it's honestly very unfortunate that we have. It's like it almost makes you laugh. Uh, like if it weren't so serious, this would just be just fucking hilarious at how pathetic this is.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it just shows how pathetic this country is under Trump and how pathetic he's made us as a nation. Because we're the laughing stock of the world now. No one takes us seriously for good reason. And so, I think that, and then obviously the threats against Colombia and Mexico. I mean, they're just checking off the list of all the leftist governments in Latin America because that's what we've done that's just traditional American politics is, destabilizing leftist governments all over the world, especially in Latin America. We've always been doing that. And they're just trying to go back to that, unfortunately. I think this time though, they'll probably fail spectacularly because I mean, Petro in Colombia, he's one term, like presidents in Colombia can only have one term, so he's already term limited in the elections this year, so he's going to be gone at the end of the year anyway.
Yeah.
And then, Sheinbaum has like 80% approval in Mexico. Like, there's no way you're going to be able to do anything to her.
Right.
And, even with Cuba, like, I feel like, there, I I don't see uh, I think we should probably once again read history and check back on how last time we tried to do anything with Cuba and see how that went. So,
Yeah. No, seriously. It's just wild to me because like I don't know, like after he said that he was open to using like military force against Greenland and talking about like I mean, this was immediately after the Maduro situation and saying like, the threats against Mexico and saying like, well, Mexico needs to go and figure it out. I his ability to go and ruin so many relationships with so many different countries within the
mm,
past year, just I mean, these blanket tariffs too. I mean, the fact like we had a surplus with both the UK and Australia, yet they were still hit by tariffs. And that to me just showed that there was no common sense being used in terms of like what he was trying to do in terms of these tariffs. Like, he talked about bringing back American manufacturing, but we've seen basically a manufacturing recession in the United States. There is over, I think it was
yeah.
like 20,000, 30,000 manufacturing jobs lost over the past year. And that was immediately following the tariffs that were announced on Liberation Day. Um, which, I mean, do you think, do you think that it's possible for us to recover after Donald Trump is gone out of the United States, like, or not out of the United States, but gone out of the presidency? Do you think that it's like possible to mend these relationships or at least do it within the next like 10 to 15 years after someone like Donald Trump comes in and goes scorched earth?
I mean, yeah, I do think that what you're saying, like 10, 15 years, I think it's going to take a long time, unfortunately, to recover from all the damage he's done just in one year. And we're not even talking about Doge as well, that all the damage that Son Doge did to
Yeah.
undo basically our entire government and make it ineffectual, which is, by the way, that's their goal, right? And this has always been the goal of Republicans, is to purposely undermine government, make it not work so they make the argument that we have to privatize everything so that then they can make more money, right?
Yeah.
Because that's all it's about. So I think that unfortunately, yes, a lot of damage has been done. It's going to take a long time to recover and get back to it. And also, on top of that, then try to shift towards a government, that actually works for people and having affordable housing, universal health care, making sure that we're having a living wage for folks, union rights, investing back into education because they're cutting that as well. So obviously, yes, we've taken steps back. I think it's a very unfortunate dark time that we're in, frankly. Um, but I think for me, you know, we always have a history of like, all of our ancestors fighting in some of the most difficult scenarios that you can imagine and wondering how they did it. And I think that, you know, we're in a very dark place right now and it's very hard to see the light.
Yeah.
But if they're able to do it, I think that it's our time to show that we can also push past that and get past this um, very difficult time that a lot of people are facing. It's going to take a lot of courage. It's going to take a lot of work, and there's going to be suffering. It already has been suffering. But to me, the only thing we can do is fight, continue to fight every single day
Yeah.
to change it and to make it better. So,
No, I 100% agree. Well, I want to hear, let's kind of shift to a more positive term. Legislation session just started. What are some of the policies that you're excited, some of the legislation that you're excited to pass? What are some of the legislation that you're most proud of that you helped to pass last year and some of the impacts that they've had so far?
yeah. So, I think there's a lot of work to be done, as we said. So, last year I did put forward the number one thing I heard from my community is that housing is an issue. There's a housing crisis, especially here in Georgia. The Metro Atlanta market is the most inflated market in the entire country. We also have the highest percentage of corporate land ownership, corporate landlord ownership in our housing market, and so uh, we needed to do a lot around that. So I introduced legislation to end the ownership of single family homes by huge corporations, so that because in my view, homes should be for families, not for these big companies to come in. And so that legislation I put forward, and I actually had there was other representatives who put out similar legislation. It didn't go as far as mine, but it does regulate it. And theirs actually did get some traction. It didn't pass, but we're looking to pass that in this session. Also, one bill of mine that did get a little bit of traction, I got a hearing in committee, was a bill to ban AI software from being used to artificially increase rents. And so that one I'm looking to get a vote in committee this year, um, and hopefully get it on the floor. And then we also introduced $20 minimum wage bill because we believe that's the bare minimum that Georgians need to be able to live. And then this year, and I also did a bill on ICE, make sure they publicly identify themselves. Um, and obviously, as I mentioned previously, we had a press conference today where there's more bills being introduced around ICE. And
Yeah.
so I think there's a lot of good stuff there going on. I am happy to say that a part of my bill for the minimum wage bill, the $20 minimum wage bill had a provision in it that got rid of the uh, disabled minimum wage, which is basically like um, we had a exception in the minimum wage law that allows for folks with disabilities to get paid even less than a minimum wage, which is insane. Fortunately, that part of the bill did get passed last session. That
Good.
we are able to remove that. So in Georgia, there will no longer be a sub minimum wage for disabled folks. They'll have the same as everyone else, which I think is obviously a win. Got to do more. Um, this year, I'm working on a universal health care bill, single payer, basically Medicare for all for here in Georgia,
Yeah.
and getting money out of politics in general. There's a lot of corruption. We got to make sure we do everything we can so we don't have these huge corporations and these lobbyists coming in and telling our politicians what to do when they should instead be listening to the people,
Yeah.
right? And so that's something I'm working on. And then I'm looking at the data center issue. Georgia actually has the highest increase in data centers in the country, and so we're seeing our energy bills skyrocket because of it. And so I want to make sure we can put a hold on that to help with that. And so
That's awesome. That's really
yeah.
exciting. What what is one piece of legislation that you helped to pass last year that you are very proud of and that you are like you've seen material impact?
hmm Yeah, that was the sub minimum wage bill that went around the disabled folks. That
Okay.
was the one that, was a part of my bill. Obviously, someone else introduced that alone and they got that passed. But obviously, um, supported that. And so I'm glad that we were able to get that through. That was, for me, one of the biggest things. Let me try to remember. I have this stuff written down so I can actually look real quick. But unfortunately, the the Georgia is still controlled by Republicans, so there's not that.
Speak, speaking of,
Um, we
I
did get
want
um,
go
we
ahead.
did codify IVF into law, so IVF is now protected under law in Georgia, which is good. So I'm glad we were able to do that. Um,
Crazy that we had to do it in the first place, but yeah, glad that
I
you.
know, honestly. Um, but yeah, honestly, that was really the main. And then we did pass one housing bill. It does a little bit of help. It helps a little bit. Essentially, it requires any landlord that's out of the state. it requires them to have at least one working employee in the state of Georgia in the area, right?
Okay.
Uh, so that you can't just have like if you have like an issue or like a maintenance request, you can't like they can't just ignore you because they're out of state, and they have to have someone there to respond to stuff. So, something to help with some of those like slumlords that we have around here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Speaking of control, this kind of want to wrap this up. Who do you want to see as governor or running in the primaries for governor for the Democratic Party this year for Georgia?
So I'm endorsing Ruo Roman, State Representative Ruo Roman for governor.
Okay.
She is the only Palestinian legislator in the Southeast. She's amazing. She's very progressive. She actually was assigned to be my mentor in my first year. And so I have a good working relationship with her, and she's a very progressive person who I think will actually fight for working people. And I think she might surprise some folks in the primary. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Well, we appreciate. Do you have anything else before I end this interview, Chase?
Not specifically. I was interested in the Medicare for all for Georgia. As being a Georgia resident, that sounds very interesting. And like I'm curious as to how much support you're getting for that and like where that's going. But
Right.
I very much look forward to something like that being, delivered because healthcare is, it's a massive issue, especially as we're going up with, premium increases and really just, the entire healthcare system in which we operate just doesn't really make sense in the modern world to me.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's insane, and that's why I'm introducing it to talk about the issue. Obviously, like because the Republicans control, yeah, the path to passing it is very narrow. But no matter what, I'm going to continue to fight for it and put it forward and have a talk about it because at the very least, we deserve to talk about this issue and push it forward as much as we can, and that's my intent on that. So they wield their power pretty they're very good at making sure we don't get anything done as Democrats because we unfortunately in Georgia we have a very very majoritarian like chamber more than like most, and so as a minority party it's almost impossible, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to fight for it and push for it. And so you know for example last year I believe about 120 bills passed and four of them were Democrat bills. So they're very good at making sure we don't get anything, but we're still going to keep fighting no matter what. So,
I mean, that's the only thing you can do. Well,
Mhm.
yep.
we appreciate you, Gabriel. Obviously, hoping for your success. We're excited for your next go around. You're still going to be under 42, right? They haven't
Yep.
gerrymandered you out of the way.
Yeah, but they'll do no redistricting yet this year. Hopefully, we'll keep that way until 2032. That's when it's supposed to happen again. So,
Yeah, we'll check back then. But we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, and excited to see what happens this year.
yeah, thank you. And make sure to get out there and vote because midterm elections are important, not just in the general election. We do need to flip to actually have a chance, but also in the primaries. So we make sure if we do
True.
flip, we actually have real folks Democrats who are actually going to fight for people.
Very
Mhm.
true. Awesome.
Yep.
Well, we appreciate it, Gabriel.
Thank you guys.
Have a good one.
You too.